which started in university when everybody thought it was way too long for shortening. I'm really from the Netherlands, so I'm still, you have an 11-year-old daughter, so my US education is up to middle school. I now understand how middle school works. That's about as far as I get. I still haven't quite figured it all out. I guess we'll do high school next. I've been with Oracle since '97. I stopped counting, so I just give you the birth year. Interestingly enough, however, it's my fourth job. And so I've done consulting. I did data warehouse implementations on e-business suite and things like that in the Netherlands. And then I moved to product management and I went to my third product now. So starting products is pretty cool. Building them out is pretty cool. The nice thing of doing it at a single company, Oracle, the mothership is really big. You can switch around, you can move around, you can do most of the things. The nice thing of doing it at a single company that you don't have to start all the way from scratch. Like you can leverage your relationships and you can start innovating without trying to first innovate in relationships and find people to sponsor and all of that stuff. I found that pretty interesting, and it's one of the interesting things of working at a big company like this. I live in Belmont, so my commute to work is about a mile. If the traffic lights are green, it takes about 1.3 minutes. The commute back typically is 20 minutes because everybody stands in line for the freeway on that. So I should probably walk, but hey, what can you do? So that's kind of it. Like I'm doing product management for Oracle's big data stack right now. We started the business in 2011 with like 4 developers and a product manager. We're up to like 50 people and 5 product managers now, probably in the 75 to 100 million revenue. It's a pretty exciting journey, and leveraging Oracle's resources is very interesting as you get going, like I said, right away. We do hire, and we hire across the board, right? We look at like product management, which we often look for people who have done a little bit of consulting or have done a little bit of customer work. We do hire them straight out of school as well. It's a little bit of an interesting journey as to how you get the product management. Development is obviously a little bit easier, so we hire developers as well in the Hadoop space, in the database space, and whatnot. I'm sure we'll talk more about some of those things going forward. That's a little bit about me. Like I said, I've been in Oracle for a while, but I'm my fourth job. So, there you go.
Thank you so much. I think one of the most important opportunities you have now is you have a vast array of knowledge at this table. And as you are all really starting to prepare for this next journey that you have in your lives, this is a great opportunity to ask questions. You've got hiring managers, you've got Oracle product people, you've got consultants, you've got sales. You've really got the whole gamut here that can really help drive any of you guys into a good direction. And even after this is done, you feel free to come out to them and ask even more questions. Is there anyone right now that has a specific question for any of our professionals here?
So folks, we're basically opening for Q&A session in case you have any questions related to our today's discussion. Please open.
So, like you explained, that you hire product managers as well as developers and implementers. I think I was loud enough. So, yes, like you mentioned, you hire product managers as well as developers. So I want you to know, for analytics, what kind of skills you specifically look, in the portfolio, the kind of work you're looking for product management in analytics?
So I don't think it truly matters whether it's analytics or big data or database or whatnot. Some people disagree with me, by the way, right? Some people say specialisms are interesting. I think in product management you look for generalism. I don't think you look for deeply technical. You look for a balance between, let's call them soft skills and more technical skills. Because ultimately, as a product manager, you have 2 jobs. one job is to translate to developers who do not necessarily have ever seen a customer, to basically explain why certain things have to behave like that, how they work. So you're an intermediary between a user and somebody who has to go write code to make that user's life not miserable but pleasurable. And so that's one of your jobs. The other job is to go out and basically explain to people and customers and partners how stuff works, why yours is better, blah, 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 all of those things. So you have this odd job of having to understand what a developer is going to do and how he or she is going to do it, and translating things. So we look much more less towards resume to some extent, like, oh, I have done these classes. It's like, okay, we look for fundamentals. Do you understand fundamentals in science and all that stuff, because you'll need them. But then, have you expanded your world vision? Like, have you expanded, and are you familiar with concepts, and can you explain concepts? And can you translate concepts and stuff like that? So it's a lot more softer skill things we look at. Whereas in development, you look at, okay, can you solve this logical algorithm? Like, we do parallel processing, how does this work? Can you figure out, can you tell me, can you show me, can you explain this, and write the code? But in product management, you're really bridging that. It's a very hard job to hire for. So it's also a very hard job to build a resume for, if you think of it like that. That's why we always look, not always, that's why your first job, if you go into, for example, sales consulting or consulting or something like that, you get to do some of these things. You have to talk to a client, you have to explain things, you have to do some of that stuff. That helps building up those skills. Not sure if that really helps, but it's conceptually that way.
I can add a few things to that, just in the scope of hiring and interviewing and what companies out there are looking for. There's always so many different perspectives to take that from. If you look out there on any of the job boards today, you'll see that some companies are looking to hire based on the culture that you want to join. Some are adamantly saying you must have X, Y, and Z in terms of a degree, a certification, or be able to be in a certain location and apply your skill set. You never know exactly what any one company's hiring theory will come down to. There's so many companies out there right now that are simply trying to create a culture versus necessarily saying you have to have a certain set of skills coming in the door, because the company wants to create a community of people that they believe are ambitious with a foundation that they can build and grow from. And there are so many different opportunities in the technology space to come from. I started as a recruiter. The way that I got into Oracle, I applied for an administrative assistant job, and it turned out that I talked my way into an Oracle recruiting position because I was very lucky. I saw an Oracle magazine on a table, and my mother's been implementing Oracle for 25 years with Capgemini, so things just clicked. That may not happen for everyone, but the point that I'd like to just follow up on, and for your question and from what JP said, really having your resume and your LinkedIn and your social media platforms articulating who you are, what your foundation of your qualifications are, and what you want to do, and what you can bring to a company is very, very important for any type of position that you might be looking for. You're welcome.
Get out a little bit more to that too. And I don't want to steal all the thunder from my session at 10 o'clock. We'll dive a little bit deeper into that. Okay, thank you. So, as JP mentioned, where he's at, they're not just looking for skill sets, they're looking for people that have sort of innate intelligence that can overcome and thank you. Yeah.
Always good words, we want to realize.
All right, overcome challenges on the job site. And as Liz mentioned, there's not, you'll see Glassdoor, Indeed, some of those big job boards out there, they're looking for specific skills. Obviously, that's important for a lot of positions, but when you really get down to it, as a hiring manager like I am, you're looking for team fit as well. And this person that I'm bringing into my team, will they fit with that team? Okay? And another thing is, will I be able to invest in this person with my limited training dollars, will I be able to invest in them and see a return? So it's not just skill sets, it's not just innate intelligence, but a lot of it has to do with human factor and team factor.
Thank you.
I have one more question for Jean-Pierre. You mentioned that you're working in a big data stack. Could you elaborate a little bit more in terms of your 50 so people? Like, are you doing the whole stack, or I'm just curious in terms of how that divided between your product managers as well?
Sure. So we, for a number of things, we actually package something from a company called Cloudera. So we take the open source Hadoop stack and package that. So we actually automate and administer and do a bunch of that stuff, which some of our developers do. We make the Oracle SQL engine actually work on unstructured data in Hadoop and NoSQL and whatnot. So we have a team that actually does that, which is hardcore query optimization. It's Java and C combined. We probably have about 45 developers. I would say that about 25 of them do SQL engine stuff, things like that. We probably have about 15 people who do platform and cloud automation and cloud infrastructure and orchestration and stuff like that. And we have 4 product managers now. And we tend to do a product manager per product. I'm the unlucky one, or lucky one, depends how you look at it. I get to do 2 products, which is not good for your health, by the way, so don't try to do that. And so that's kind of the makeup of the team, and we do the full stack. And if you look at our transition to cloud, we do more and more of the full stack, which includes upgrading OS and Java and all sorts of stuff like that. So we have development roles across hardcore C, Java, integration, instrumentation, and all of that, just in that 50 people team discussion. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's kind of how we make stuff. And product managers basically own a product and drive the requirements as well as the go-to-market and things like that.
Hi, this question is also for JP. You brought up project management, and I was very curious, how does Oracle or your group identify the need for a new product? And also, how much research go into the product before the development? And how fast would the product be rolled out into the market? And so secondly, is there a problem with interest or demand for the needs identified in the lifetime of the product gets released?
Wow, okay. How do we identify the need for a product? It's a number of things. It is, in many cases, customer driven. Like you see problems and you see people trying to solve things, and we have nothing to solve that with. Sometimes it's actually driven out of research, where you start to see kind of macro trends, right? Where you start to see people moving or trying to ask you questions. How do I put certain formats in any database? Just talk about big data, for example. And the answer is, well, they don't really fit. Okay, so where do they go then? Like, oh, good question. New product. Right? So we just invented a new product because somebody has a need that says all of this stuff out of digitization needs to go somewhere. Where do we put it? Okay, let's go build something that looks like the new for HDFS or whatever it is. So people find needs based on what customers are doing, essentially. How fast, so how much research then goes into it, it depends a little bit. Most things start with an idea and you start implementing the idea. Don't assume that product managers know what the world looks like 2 years from now or 5 years from now. We, like anybody else, just guess. And so you start effectively implementing and then looking for feedback, right? You give it to people who do consulting, you give it to people who are solving business problems, you get feedback. And sometimes that is like, what are you guys thinking? It makes absolutely no sense. You want to go, okay. You still keep on going because if one person says it doesn't make any sense, that doesn't mean it's a bad idea. Removing buttons from a phone sounds like a bad idea to people. But you keep on driving forward, and sometimes it's a leap of faith. But you do get feedback and you do adjust. And I think that's a big shift that happened over the last 15 years, where we do a lot less monolithic, invent, build, don't share, keep on building, now release and go, yay, we've done it. It's much more iterative, feedback driven, and we release in much faster increments and things like that. So agility is genuinely important. Timing is even more important, and it's the hardest one to get right. When we started our big data products in 2011, we basically built an engineered system for Hadoop. And in 2012, everybody said, like, you guys are a bunch of idiots. Like, Hadoop is self-healing, it's easy, like, it's all a bunch of open source software. Why on earth would I even apply it? And we were like, no, but it's clustered software, it's not going to be easy, we do all of this work for you. Like, no. But we were told literally for 2 years, we're idiots, right? But that's fine. We learned from databases that this is not easy. So sometimes you have to endure. Had we started 2 years later, we had saved ourselves the 2 years of pain, essentially, to get this product going. But we also suffered